So we're just moving into the second week of September, and it's time for all those September chores and that. Your annual planters are probably looking a little bit tired. We've had a long, hot summer this one, and so a lot of the annuals have just kind of dwindled out and just tired from all the stress of the summer. But now's a great time to be looking at and just seeing what's available that maybe you can spruce up those containers with. And sometimes you can maybe leave some of the plants that are looking great. Maybe you have some great potato vine in a planter, some ivy coming out. That still looks in great shape. So you might want to consider leaving some of the items in and switching them out, or maybe you're just ready for a complete redo of your containers. We're always having people over in October. October is a busy month for gatherings and that, so it's nice to spruce up your front yard, even on your decks and patios. Hopefully we get a warm fall and you're spending some time out there. So even just a couple planters will just make your garden and your house come to life again. So now we're going to just kind of demonstrate a couple different planters and give you some helpful tips. So no matter what you're doing as far as planters go, if you're more formal, if you're very rustic in your planters, it's same tips for each, just picking the right plants for your planters. So we'll just kind of go along and learn about it to begin with. We like doing our planters into just a plain nursery pot. You could be doing it right into your decorative pot as well. It's nice just to be able to lift out the planter that was in there and then just be able to drop a new planter in. We also have to be careful with some of the decorative pots. They don't have drainage, and that can be a real issue. The fall planters are probably only going to be there for a month or so not as critical as it is with your annual planters. But you want to make sure that your container does have great drainage. So this larger size pot that I have here, it's about 16 inches in diameter. It's got about 4 or 5 drainage holes at the bottom. So you want to start with that and make sure you've got good drainage there. And then you might want to add some stone or even broken clay pots if you kept them around, and just put them at the bottom as well. It kind of covers the holes, not letting the soil run out, but it also just allows the water to run out. So it just improves your drainage as well. In the containers, I always love using the potting soil. You can use a topsoil in that, but it's just heavy and it's harder for the plants to grow into it, and just doesn't drain as well. So if you get a lighter potting soil or potting mix, it's just a lighter soil, has that perlite, vermiculite, all that good stuff added into it. So it just allows for better drainage in it. So when you start up, and what I've done with this larger container that we have, is I've kind of figured out what my deepest pot will be. So I filled up the container only up to here right now. I know a lot of people will fill up the container and then try to push the plants into the soil, and that's just stressful on them, so don't do that. So fill up, kind of take your biggest plants, and for this one, we're going to use the purple fountain grasses. And it's a great one to add that color in the fall. They get the fuzzy plumes out onto them and that. They can be quite large, so this is better suited to larger containers as it is to a small container. But we'll show you afterwards as well. Maybe you just have a grouping of containers and they're all relatively small. So instead of doing a mixed planter, what you can do is actually just do one planter with the grass in it. Maybe that's in your tallest planter that you have. In your medium-sized pot that you have, maybe you're going to a nice large-sized mum. And then maybe down into like the ornamental peppers and that, or maybe a cabbage in the shortest pot. So if you have a bigger space, sometimes instead of doing a mixed planter, it is better just to do one big plant in several planters. And you can rearrange it different ways and play around with it that way. But if you've only got space for one container in that, it's nice to get a variety of color. With this big grass, what I'm going to do is show more of a formal or contemporary look. Usually if you have those tall, narrow pots, whether they're round or square, you're really looking for one major specimen plant into there. And you want it fairly simple. So we're only going to use 3 different types of plants in this planter. You don't want to get too busy if you love that contemporary, simple look to it. Most of the time we're thinking fall is more rustic, but you can still have that contemporary look. So as I said, we filled up the soil just part way up, and we're just going to tap this pot off. And because the roots are so thick around the edges, we're just going to go through and break those roots up a little bit. Again, in the fall planter, they're only going to be there for a month or 2, so not as critical. But when the roots are this thick around, what happens is they'll just keep going around in that pattern and not root out into the soil. The more they can root out yet, the longer they will last for your fall containers. One other thing to consider is where your container is going to sit. If the container is being viewed from many directions, maybe it's on your front walkway, so people are viewing it from the street. They're also viewing it in from the driveway as they come up, and you're also viewing it from the front door as you come out the front door. So if it's being viewed from all sides, we will put the major plants more into the center of the planter itself. And then have something all the way around so that everyone sees the same thing. If your large container that you're doing a contemporary look in is up against a post pillar of the porch or something, or against the wall at the patio, you would move your largest thing more to the back of the container. You're not going to be seeing it from all around, so there's really no sense of putting plants that aren't going to be seen back there, and it allows you a bit more space at the front of the pot to do so. So say we're doing more of a tall round pot that we're going to set this into. So I'm going to start with that one in the center. And when it's set into the soil that's already in the container, you want the top of the root ball just to be slightly lower than the rim of the pot. And that's so that when you water, all the water is not going to be gushing over the sides, but is actually going to help the water sink down into the planter itself. So just make sure you're a finger or two widths just below the edge of the pot when you put things in. Now that's going to be our deepest plant, our plant with the biggest root ball. So now we just need to fill up with soil around it and ready for our next layer of plants to go in. So I've just finished filling up the pots. So now we started with the level at here for our largest plant, and now we filled it up to about here. And we don't want to go with too many different things around the edge if this is going to be more of a contemporary style. We want to keep the planting fairly simple looking. So right now you'll see all the flowering cabbage and kale in that out at this time. You'll get them in different shades of purples. The cabbage is a bit more a broader leaf. Your kales will be a much finer leaf. So you get some really nice texture in that with it. So you could either do all the same type around it, or we could just kind of mix some of the colors around. The cabbage always has that kind of a nice contemporary look to them. So our soil level is just going to be so that they sit in there nicely. Again, just below the rim of the pot. We're just going to loosen up that root ball again a bit. And because these plants are only going to live together for a couple months, you don't have to be too afraid of getting the plants too close together in there and the root ball's fairly packed in, because they're only going to spend a month or so together. Your cabbage will kind of winter into go into December, January, still looking great. Your grass is going to turn more brown as the season goes on, but it is something that you could go into well into December until you're ready to switch around with your Christmas plantings in those containers. So because we're wanting to keep this fairly simple looking, and we're just going to repeat that same pattern around. And because it's going to be viewed from all sides, I will also then have it that it comes right around the pot. So we've gone right around the container and just add the cabbage in there. The grass, of course, is going to be your main focal point. And as I said before, if you've had some summer planters and maybe some of the trailers that were in there, maybe you had some English ivy in there, but the potato vine will look good until the frost. You can maybe keep those in there and add to it. Today I'm just going to use some smaller periwinkle that we have, and which you can also add to your garden later on. So when you sit this into a decorative pot, then you have something that's going to trail over the edge. Even if you have some English ivy in the garden, or even some golden creeping jenny, which is a perennial ground cover, something like that makes a nice colorful trailer as well. So again, we would just continue around the pots, so it's equal from all sides. So basically, we've just stayed with 3 different types of plants. We have the purple fountain grass, the cabbage and the kale, and then just a trailer with the periwinkle. So at this point, I would just go in with a shovel again and just fill up in between those root balls, and just making sure that soil level is just below the rim of the pots. So for a very simple look, a very classic look, the taller your pot is, the taller the plant should be that's in it. If all you did was a big low mum into a tall container, it's not going to look balanced. but adding something like this grass in there to give that height is just really going to set your containers off. If you're looking for something different in the front or wanting more color of that, you can be finding sunflowers at this time of year with the large flower heads, and doing a cluster of those into the center as well. That gets a bit more into the rustic. So for the contemporary, I like just to focus more on the foliage in the fall, and that will give you color right into December. And so a great way just to perk up those summertime containers that you have. Now we're going to look at doing a rustic fall container. I've put some soil into the bottom, some nice potting soil, and my biggest container that I'm going to use is just in a little 15 centimeter pot. So I filled up my main container that has great drainage holes, filled it about half full so that when I sit it in, it'll be at the right spot, and just using a nice loose potting mix that drains well into there. And so we're going to pretend that this pot is going to be sitting up against a wall. Maybe you're like me and have a very small front porch, and if it's sat in the middle of the porch, it would take up the porch. So we're going to do one that's going to sit closer to the wall. And what I'm starting off with is a wood fern. It's actually a perennial fern, and so it's something that afterwards you can even put into your garden if you've got a nice shady place to put it into. So don't be afraid that it doesn't have to just be kale and cabbage and mums. Use some other ideas into there. I'll be showing you some today as well. And so just want to get that wood fern as the tall point to the back, and just loosening up that root system. And once I set it in there, I just want to make sure that it's sitting slightly below the rim of the pot. But I'm going to move it towards the back of the pot because it's going to be up against a wall or a fence, and that allows me a little bit more space in front here to put it in. So we've got that one in place already. Next, I'm going to set a mum in, and we're in the second week of September, so the mums haven't really opened up too much yet, which actually is a great thing. If you're buying mums that are fully opened, they're not going to last very long for you. So if you can still get them fairly tight, or maybe you just want them starting to show a little bit of color so you know what color you're getting. But this mum will still go for a month and a half with some color onto it. So if you're doing your planters up early in that, don't be afraid. Most of them have color stickers in, so you know what color of mum you'll be getting. Hopefully it's true to label. But yeah, maybe you just want a little bit of color showing, and then you know it's going to last a long time yet. So once that's sitting in there, it's still at the same level, just below the rim of the pot. And there's a lot of different things that you can do to even get more color. We have the ornamental peppers that are coming out right now. You can get red and yellows and all that. We're always asked if they're edible. From what I'm told by other co-workers, they are, but they're very, very, very hot. But they're really not the edible peppers, more just an ornamental show. So we can be adding something like that in for color. I also mentioned adding in some different perennials. And here we've got a coral bells, has a beautiful burgundy leaf to it. Still kind of a bit of a fall color. And the coral bells usually keeps most of their leaves for the winter time. So that will last a long time in your container as well. And you can get some coral bells. This one's called Pumpkin Spice, and just has more of that bronzy tone to it. It's already a great fall looking type of plant, and as the fall goes on, it'll just become more intense, kind of a bronzy orange in color. So another great one. Or even using some of your hostas. I like the gold ones for the fall. That's going to give you some leaf color in there as well. So different things that you can be choosing from to get that color going into there. We also have the cabbage in that as well. But also be thinking what else you can be adding in to make it more rustic looking, or even a bit to the traditional. You could be adding something in like a grapevine ball. And grapevines, of course, goes along with fall, especially here in the Niagara region. You think of what's going on at this time. You can also be using old grapevines. So here we have an older stump of a grapevine, and that could go into the container as well, and just add something different into there. But again, it kind of goes in. We always think of grapes being harvested in the fall. So maybe we're adding something like that into the planter as well. And it just picks up on the theme of it and ties you into your region, which is nice. So just make sure you're putting in any larger things like a grapevine or that into the pot before you fill up right with soil. It's hard to get in at the end. But maybe that just adds to the height of things at the back here. When you have a larger container, instead of using all 4-inch pots, it would take many pots to fill that up to make it look full. It's better if you can start with a larger size. Usually it's something like the cabbage you can get in a 4-inch pot. This is a 6-inch pot. They go all the way up to a 2-gallon pot. So if you do have a larger size container, try to fit larger size plants into that container with it. We're not seeing a lot of color there with the mums still closed up, but there'll be a nice pink color once they come out. You can also be adding things in, even like a grapevine wreath or that, kind of to pick up on that theme. So maybe you have kind of a grape theme to your fall planter. And then we could still add some peppers in there for some color as well. But it doesn't just have to be our typical mums that we see everywhere. Try and be something different, something that picks off on your style of landscaping or what you might have going on in the home. So we're just kind of add in a little red pepper there for some color. And once that mum opens up and is in full bloom in the next couple weeks, it should go right into Thanksgiving with flowers onto it. So you're going to have a long time interest in there. So don't be afraid to add little touches into your planters. Try something different. Maybe it's an ornament you already have sitting in your garden that you can make use of and add some interest that way. And just to add some trailing, I have a variegated vinca vine, a variegated periwinkle. And we can just add that in there to get a bit of a trailing effect as well. So this could either sit out on its own or it could be dropped into a larger decorative pot. But it just has that nice rustic look to it. You could also be adding some branches into it if you wanted to, just if you wanted more height into the planter itself. Maybe you're just adding in a cluster of 3-5 stems in there as well, and it's a way of getting more height. We could have been using a taller ornamental grass in there too, even some of your perennial grasses that are just getting their seed heads on for the fall. We'll add some great color into there. Something like zebra grass or variegated miscanthus. So even adding something like that, and again, you can still put it in your garden come springtime, or even in the fall yet before. So just adding a few more stems in there as well can add some height and just some interest and make your planter a bit different than what your neighbor's planter is. So maybe you just have a spot for a small container, and that's even great to bring in, say, Thanksgiving Day or that, you just want to bring some color onto the table or that. And so you can be bringing this in as well. So small containers, maybe have a patio table out back that you just want a bit of color on for the fall as well. So I just want to show you what we could do with a smaller container. And going to start with another perennial grass. This is Japanese bloodgrass. And once again, I've just filled up the soil to where the base of the biggest pot will be, and this will be our deepest pot. The Japanese bloodgrass is great because it gets even more red as the fall goes on, so it just intensifies in color. And again, it's something that you can add to your garden at the end of the season. Another great plant that you'll see blooming in the fall is autumn joy sedums. There's actually a large family of sedums, and most of them get nice pink flowers. There's some that are very low spreading that can trail over the edge of the pots. This one eventually can get to be 2.5 feet tall, but right now we just have a cute little one here, so we're going to add that to our container. So this one will keep blooming well into October, and the grass will just get brighter and brighter red as we go. And maybe just to pick up on some of the red here, maybe we'll just put in some of the ornamental peppers again. We talked about if you have a large container, start with larger size plants, but definitely if you have a smaller container, it fills up very quickly. And so you'll just be able to add in a couple things to it. We can still add some trailing into there. We'll get some more periwinkle here. So a small container like this, it's about 10 inches in diameter. If you can get 3 decent sized plants into it, that would be great. But when you're looking for ideas to put in your containers, again, just don't look at the mums and peppers and that. Walk around and see what else is looking great. There's a lot of perennials right now that's looking fantastic that you could be adding in. And these will just kind of trail over the side. That one wants to stick up there. And so that will just give you a small container. Again, you could be adding some stems or that into it just to give a bit more interest. I have some curly willow stems here. That's look a little bit more natural in that, but has a great effect in a container. So you can be adding some of that in just to fill it out, give it a bit more airiness as too. You don't want anything too heavy looking in the size of container, it just won't look balanced for you. And once we have everything in, again, we're just going around with some soil and filling in between the root balls and adding some color there. So there's a lot of great plants out there that will give you some color. There's no reason for your pots and that to look really drab for the fall. Give it new life and keep the season going a bit longer. It's too early to pack up the garden and go inside. So make sure you're adding some color to your garden. So for something different, we have this wooden planter box here. I think it'll make a great fall planter. And even using something like the birch branches in it, I know we typically think of it as Christmas. It'll just make your Christmas transition a bit quicker. But it also goes in with kind of that rustic wood look that we have going on. Afterwards, you can just take out your fall plants, do your Christmas planter, and you're all set to go. So 2 for the price of 1. So again, with it being a wood planter, it is a bit more rustic looking. So we're going to just make that the look for it. And the first thing I have is called Blue Zinger Carex, and it's another perennial sedge. It actually stays blue most of the winter, so it can even stay in there for the winter months. Again, I filled up the soil about halfway up in here, because most of the pots I'm using are a 1 gallon size. So once it gets seated in there, then it should just be below the level of the rim of that. And so that will kind of just trail over the edge of the pot there and look great. You can even be adding in things, again, to make it more rustic. I just have an old tree stump here that's kind of rotted off, and so that could be added in as well. And I'm going to use this ornamental pepper that has all these beautiful yellow peppers on them right at the moment. It's going to add some color into there. And just to add a bit more color, I'm going to use kale, and this one's a nice, kind of got a nice rosy plum tone to it. And we'll just use that back here as a bit of a filler. We can get some leaves kind of going forward on it. And I have this variegated English ivy and just a nice yellow and green leaf to it. So we're just going to add it in here as a trailer as well onto this corner. So it's already giving you a full effect. Again, this is kind of a short-lived planter. It's only going to be in here for a couple months. So you just want to make sure that you have a nice full look to begin with. And kind of a nice rustic effect. Still has different foliage colors, different textures in it, so still giving you that interest that you need in a container for the fall. So just a couple final pointers in that about your fall containers. If it is a container or decorative pot that you're wanting to leave out for the winter time, make sure that it's one that can tolerate the cold and the freezing and thawing. So if you have a clay pot or a concrete pot, they're more prone to crack in the wintertime. If they absorb moisture, so if the material that they're made from is porous, when it freezes and thaws, it causes the pot to expand and contract, which will cause cracking. So if you're sticking with a plastic pot, maybe it's a metal pot, there's a lot of poly resin pots that are winter hardy as well. Maybe it's a wooden container that we've done this planter up into. So just make sure if you're leaving it out there throughout the winter, hopefully with some nice fresh greens in it, that it is something that can tolerate that cold temperature. And also add in your own flavors. You've now got colorful plants going into there, and maybe you're known for loving bugs or something like that. Have this little cute butterfly that's actually solar powered, so it actually will light up at night. So maybe that'll be nice by your front door. But you can always add those special touches. Chances are you've already got these items in your garden, and why not just add them to your container and add that special touch. So even into this rustic planter that we've done in that, there's this cute little ladybug that will just add a little charm and a little whimsy into your planters. So look around your garden, see what you might have that you can just add to a container, put it in a different spot, and appreciate it more. And I love adding those little pieces in. It's what truly makes a planter yours. So it's always great to look around, whether it's an old piece of wood, whether it's an insect of some sorts, hopefully healthy, good ones like the ladybug. Just look around for those things. I've even seen old shoes used, old work boots used as planters. So make sure you're adding your special touches into that. So just to summarize, 5 quick tips of how to do a fall planter. Make sure you're choosing the right container. and that the container has great drainage in it, and that you use a lighter soil that will drain well. The next thing is pick items that is going to give you lots of color. You want this planter to take you at least through the month and past October. So when you're looking for your plants, pick plants that are just coming into bloom, not fully open, and try and get some different leaf colors and textures in there as well, just to add that interest. Make sure you're watering your container. It depends if you're having more shade or sun, but probably at least twice a week you're going to have to give your container some water just to hold it through. And you can't really say how much water, it just depends. The larger the container, the more water it's going to require. The fourth tip is when you're choosing your pot, make sure it's one that can stay out if you're leaving it out for the winter time. So look for metal, wood, or a resin type of pots. And then you can just switch it over quickly to your winter planter when it comes time. And the fifth tip is just add your own little touches to it. Make it something special. Make it so that when they come to your front door, they say, yep, that's so-and-so for you. And just add those special touches so they stop and look and just want to see what all you have in your planter. And enjoy the fall.